The Terathi delegation arrived the way they always did, with ceremony designed to intimidate. Ambassador Vasquez entered the chamber first, his ceremonial armor catching the light of the station's overhead panels, for senior attendants fanning out behind him like a living display of consequence. His species stood nearly 3 meters tall, with wide-set eyes that caught light like polished stone and a natural stillness that other species often mistook for patience. It wasn't patience. I had learned that much in my years as a diplomatic observer for the Muniz Concordat. It was the stillness of a predator that had never seriously been challenged. 17 Terathi warships sat in high orbit above the station. Everyone in the room knew it. That was the point. The Terathi had a saying that my translation implant rendered loosely as "let the sky speak before your mouth does." They were very good at letting the sky speak. I found my seat at the observer's table along the chamber's eastern wall, adjusted my translation implant, and smoothed my notes. The Muniz Concordat was small, neutral, and apparently invisible enough that both sides had agreed to allow our presence. A formality my superior had told me before I boarded the transit vessel. The Terathi would present their terms. Humanity would deliberate briefly for appearances. Then humanity would sign, because 17 warships in orbit had a way of simplifying complex decisions. I had my stylus ready to record history, or what I expected would be a very short, unremarkable chapter of it. The human delegation entered with considerably less drama. 3 people. No attendants. No ceremoniales. The lead negotiator was a woman of middle age, with dark hair pulled back without particular care and a jacket that looked like it had been slept in at least once during the transit here. She carried a single tablet and a ceramic cup of something hot, and she was reading from the tablet as she walked, finishing whatever she was looking at before she even glanced up at the room. Her name, according to my briefing, was Director Lena Vasquez. She represented the United Earth Diplomatic Commission. She had negotiated 11 interstellar agreements in the past 2 decades. I had not been able to find recordings of most of them. I noted this at the time as a curiosity and moved on. She sat. Her 2 aides sat. She took a sip from her cup and finally looked across the table at Vasquez with an expression I can only describe as mild interest. Vasquez let the silence sit for a moment, the way the Terathi always did, long enough to feel deliberate, short enough to seem controlled. Then he placed his ceremonial declaration on the table, a physical document pressed in the old Terathi tradition. The gesture was intentional. Paper meant permanence. Paper meant this was already decided. Director Vasquez, he said, his translator rendering his voice in smooth, formal tones. The Terathi Hegemony thanks you for attending. We trust the journey was acceptable. It was fine, Vasquez said. She said the way someone says the weather is fine, accurate, complete, moving on. Thank you for hosting. Vasquez tilted his head slightly. I recognized the gesture. It was what the Terathi did when they expected ceremony and received none. He recovered smoothly. Then let us proceed. You have reviewed our proposed framework. I have. And the hegemony's position regarding the Chiron corridor. I've reviewed it, yes. Another pause. Vasquez was waiting for the human to begin positioning, to open with a counteroffer, to perform the ritual dance of negotiation that would let both sides arrive at the inevitable conclusion with their dignity intact. It was how these things were done. The Terathi were patient about the performance because the performance was also part of the point. It let the smaller party feel that they had participated, that they had not simply surrendered. Vasquez did not begin positioning. She took another sip of her drink. Ambassador, she said, setting the cup down, before we go through the framework section by section, I want to make sure we're starting from the same place. Can you confirm for me, and for the record, that the hegemony's core objective here is to secure exclusive navigation rights through the Chiron corridor, with a mutual non-aggression clause that restricts human military movement in sectors 4 through 9? Vasquez's attendants exchanged the smallest of glances. The question was almost insultingly simple. Of course, that was the objective. It had been stated plainly in the proposal documents. That is correct, he said. And the hegemony's position is that in exchange, You're offering guaranteed safe passage for civilian human vessels through Terathi-controlled space, a trade facilitation agreement covering 7 listed commodity categories, and a mutual defense clause that, she glanced briefly at her tablet, activates only in the event of aggression from a third-party species not currently party to the agreement. Also correct. Great. She nodded, made a small note. I just want to make sure we both understand what's actually on the table. Sometimes these things get muddled. There was something off about the way she said it. I couldn't identify it then. I kept writing. The next 2 hours proceeded in a way that I can only describe as unusual. Vasquez would present a section of the framework. Vasquez would ask questions, specific, technical, often surprisingly mundane questions. She asked about enforcement mechanisms. She asked about the exact definition of military vessel under Terathi classification standards. She asked 3 separate questions about the timeline for the trade facilitation provisions. She did not argue. She did not push back. She asked questions with the calm, focused manner of someone trying to genuinely understand the document in front of them. Vasquez answered each question with decreasing patience. Not visibly. The Terathi were too disciplined for visible impatience, but I had spent enough time around them to read the subtle compression of his posture, the slight quickening of his responses. He had come here to receive a signature. He was being asked about cargo classification standards. At one point, one of Vasquez's aides leaned over and murmured something to her. She nodded, made another note, and said, "Ambassador, the mutual defense clause, I want to return to that. Under the current language, the clause activates if a third-party species initiates aggression. How does the hegemony define initiation in that context?" The standard definition, Vasquez said, a first act of hostile force. Right, but in cases where hostile intent is established prior to a first act, through troop movements, blockades, that kind of thing, does the clause activate preemptively or only upon confirmed first contact? Upon confirmed first contact. So if, hypothetically, a third party established a blockade of human space, not fired a shot, just blockaded, that wouldn't trigger the mutual defense clause. Correct. A blockade alone would not constitute. He stopped. The room was very quiet. Vasquez looked at the document in front of him with the expression of a being who has just heard a sound they cannot identify and are deciding whether to be concerned about it. Vasquez was looking at her tablet. She did not look up. "Director," he said carefully, "these are hypothetical questions." "Of course," she said pleasantly. "I just like to understand the edges of an agreement. It helps me explain it to my principals." She moved on to the next section. Vasquez led her, but something had shifted in his posture. He was no longer performing patience. He was actually paying attention. It happened twice more in different forms. A question about which human systems fell within the Sector 4 through 9 restriction and whether the definition could drift as territorial boundaries adjusted over time. A question about what body would arbitrate disputes over the agreement's terms and how quickly that body could convene. Each time, Vasquez asked in the same mild, genuinely curious tone. Each time, Vasquez answered, and each time, there was a moment, brief, almost imperceptible, where he seemed to hear something in his own answer that he hadn't intended. By the 3rd hour, 2 of his 4 attendants were consulting quietly with each other. One of them passed a physical note to the ambassador. He read it without expression and set it aside. Vasquez finished her drink. She set the cup down and looked up from her tablet fully for what felt like the first time. "Ambassador, I think I have a complete picture of the framework. Thank you for your patience with my questions." Vasquez's voice was measured. "Are you prepared to proceed to the signing?" "No," she said. The word landed without drama. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean forward. She said no the way she had said everything else, as a simple, accurate statement of fact. "I'm not prepared to sign today," she continued. "I'll be recommending to my principals that we decline the framework as currently written." The silence that followed was a different kind than the ones before it. Vasquez's attendants had gone completely still. He himself did not move for a long moment. "Director," his voice had lost its diplomatic smoothness. "Just slightly. You are aware of the hegemony's position regarding the consequences of 17 ships," she said. Yes. She began organizing her tablet and notes with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had a transit to catch. Ambassador, I want to be clear that this isn't a negotiating position. We genuinely cannot sign the framework as written, and I think you now understand why. She glanced up at him briefly. The mutual defense clause doesn't protect us from the hegemony. The sector restrictions limit our ability to respond to hegemony movements near our core systems. And the arbitration mechanism is seated in Terathi space, convening on Terathi timelines. She said all of this without heat, without accusation, simply listing observed facts. If we sign this, we're not signing a non-aggression pact. We're signing a document that makes it structurally easier to wage war against the U.S. while making it structurally harder for us to respond. One of Vasquez's attendants said something quietly in Terathi. My implant caught part of it. Something about the fleet, something about the station. Your ships are still up there, Vasquez said, as if she had heard the same thing without a translator. She stood, straightened her jacket. That's fine, but I want you to consider something before you make any decisions about them. She looked at Vasquez directly for the first time with an expression that I have thought about many times since. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter and considerably more unsettling. The expression of someone who has already completed a calculation and is waiting, without particular urgency, for you to finish yours. Every question I asked today is now part of the official record of this negotiation, she said. Every answer you gave is too. 12 neutral observer species have access to that record, including the Muniz Concordat. She nodded briefly in my direction without looking at me. If the hegemony takes military action against Earth following a failed negotiation in which your own ambassador confirmed, on record, that the mutual defense clause would not protect against a blockade, that record exists. Every species in this quadrant will read it. They will understand exactly what this framework was designed to do, and they will update their understanding of what it means to negotiate with the hegemony accordingly. She picked up her empty cup. We're not asking you not to go to war with us, Ambassador. That's your decision. We're just making sure that if you do, everyone will have read the transcript first. She walked out. Her two aides followed. The door closed with a sound that seemed much smaller than it should have been. I sat at the observer's table for a long time after that, looking at my notes. Vasquez and his delegation remained seated. Nobody spoke. One of his attendants reached slowly across the table and turned the ceremonial declaration face down, which I understood later was a Terathi gesture with no clean translation, something between withdrawn and not yet. The 17 ships left orbit 6 hours later. I filed my observer's report that evening. At the end, after the formal summary, I added a personal note that my superior later told me was highly irregular for official documentation. I wrote, I have attended 41 diplomatic proceedings in my career. I do not think I have ever watched someone win a negotiation by asking questions. I'm not sure I understood, until today, that this was possible. I'm going back through my notes from the past 3 hours, trying to identify the moment it was decided. I cannot find it. I think that may be the point. I left the note in.